Hey everyone, I'm Scott from Myelitis, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my experiences with vaccines since being diagnosed with MOG antibody disease. This is a question that is often asked in the support groups on MOG antibody disease, and I've also had a few messages from people asking me about my experience too, so I thought I'd make a video about it. So let's get started. Before we start, I just want to state that anything that I'm about to say is not medical advice. I am not a healthcare professional, and I am just explaining my experiences with vaccines as someone who is diagnosed with the condition. This video will not be about whether you should take vaccines or whether you shouldn't take vaccines. Please speak to your healthcare professionals before making an educated choice about whether you should be taking them or not. At the time I was taking 2.5 milligrams of steroids daily, so my immune system was being somewhat suppressed by the medication. A few months prior I had also had the annual flu vaccine, and I had no side effects or issues with it, so I was not worried about having any other vaccines in future. Before I was diagnosed I had no issues with any vaccines which I had taken in the past. Okay, so now I'll talk about my experience with the first vaccine. The first vaccine I took was on the 15th of March 2021, and this vaccine was the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for the virus involved in the recent pandemic. The vaccination centre which I had the first dose at was very well organised, and I went through the process pretty quickly. After checking my ID and giving my details, I was taken to the next part of the centre where I had to fill in a form about any medications I was currently taking, my medical history, and if there is anything that they should be aware of before the vaccination. I answered all the questions, and I mentioned that I was taking steroids and that I had been diagnosed with MOG antibody disease. The nurse then asked me some further questions before saying she had to check it with a consultant who was on site. He came over and read my information and asked a few more questions, but he then said that he was not a neurologist and that he'd never heard of the condition, so he was unable to give any specific advice. But what he did say that if my neurologist had given me the all clear to have the vaccine, then it was fine as long as I was aware of the risks that came with it, which I was. After that he signed it off, and I was then able to go to the next area in the vaccination centre in order to get the vaccine. So at the next part of the vaccination centre I went there and had the vaccine, and everything went well and there were no issues. I also decided to wait around 15 to 20 minutes after the vaccine just in case there were any adverse reactions, but thankfully there wasn't. And afterwards I was able to walk home completely fine. But later that night I began to feel some side effects. The arm where I had the vaccine had become very hot to the touch, especially near the place where I was jabbed. And my head had also begun to feel very hot too. And I remember being unable to sleep on my left side due to my arm feeling uncomfortable and aching. That night I woke up multiple times throughout the night, having to urgently go to the toilet to pee. Alongside that, when I was waking up, my whole body was sweating, which I believe is a symptom of my MOG antibody disease flaring up. As you can imagine, my sleep that night was affected by having to wake up every other hour to go to the toilet, and also dealing with my high body temperature. I found that when I have a bad night's sleep, my MOG symptoms tend to get worse the day after, and the pressures in my body tend to turn to aches, and I also experience brain fog quite often too. The day after I felt really rough, with all these symptoms appearing and also being combined with the high body temperature and also just being generally out of it. I was also at work this day, but thankfully working from home, but I can easily say that this was the most unproductive day I think I've ever had at work. I just wanted to go to sleep and try and rest it off, and I didn't really feel like doing anything else. But thankfully I was able to get through the day, and when I woke up the next day I felt a lot better. I still felt a bit tired, but the aches in my body had returned to just being pressures, and my body temperature was much more normal. Overall, I'd say I was around 80% back to normal after the one day of feeling horrible from it, and the day after that I was back to being fully well again with no issues. Okay, so now I'll talk about my experience with the second vaccine. The second vaccine dose which I had was on the 31st of May 2021, so 2.5 months after the first dose, and I was fully expecting a repeat of what happened during the first dose, since all the people I spoke to who had taken the second dose had said that it was worse. To add to the issues, I was also due to start a new job the day after, and I did not want to turn up in the state that I was after the first dose. I did make my new manager aware of how bad the first dose was and the side effects that I had, but that I said I'd still turn up to work, and thankfully it was online, but I did not know what state I was going to be in. Now once again, at the vaccination centre everything was very straightforward, and they were already aware of my condition this time, and once again the senior nurse checked that I was fine going ahead with it. Again, went through the whole process, had the vaccination, was completely fine, waited around for a bit afterwards and had no weird or adverse reactions, so it was pretty normal. And then later that night I had a similar aching in my left arm which had been jabbed, and I fully expected the worst. But thankfully I slept through the whole night and I woke up the next morning feeling pretty fine, just apart from a small ache in the arm, and I was able to go and have a good first day in my new job without any issues. So in summary, I did not have any issues with the flu vaccine whilst being diagnosed with MOG antibody disease. When it came to the AstraZeneca vaccine, the first dose I had did give me a flare-up of my symptoms, which were involved with my condition, and I was pretty out of it for the day after. Thankfully, I did not have any issues with the second dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Once again, this is not medical advice around whether you should or shouldn't take vaccines when diagnosed with a condition such as MOG antibody disease. Please speak to your healthcare professionals who are much more qualified than me to give you any advice relating to that. Lastly, thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe. We are slowly on our way to 100 subscribers, and if we can try and get there before the end of the year, then that would be really great. Subscribing is completely free, and you will be updated every single time a new video is released, so please click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next video.